Excelsior, true believers! You are about to embark upon a journey, a trip to the 70s and 80s when mighty Marvel Comics ruled over all. The Defenders, Doctor Strange, the Champions, Deathlock, the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Killraven, the Son of Satan, the Macabre Man-Thing, and all your other Bronze Age favorites every week appearing on Defenders Dialogue. Now here are your guides, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene.
Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed, and welcome back once again to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I'm Christopher Golden. And Brian, I'm just looking at the tagline above the Man-Thing title on the cover of Man-Thing number 19. And this might have been there for a while, and I just didn't notice. May have been there from the beginning, and I didn't notice. But I just love, Marvel Comics in this era always had some kind of sort of like tagline that would run above the name of the character or the name of the team. And this one says, "The most startling slime creature of all." I always thought that was Tom Snigoski, but that's a whole other story.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to keep in mind, at this era, you had Man-Thing at Marvel, you had Swamp Thing over at DC running the same time, and in the War and Black and White magazines, you had the Heap. So all three of them were competing with each other. But yeah, this is our penultimate Man-Thing episode. We will wrap up coverage next week. This week we're covering issues 19 and 20. I should warn folks, we're going to end on a cliffhanger today because this is actually a 4-issue storyline. The first time Gerber had done that in the series.
And ironically, Brian, strangely, we're wrapping up with a story this week and next week that is the only Man-Thing story that wasn't a team-up. In other words, the only issues of the Man-Thing that I actually read as a kid. You may remember I told you about the character Scavenger.
Yes.
And I was so happy when we got to these because I was like, I don't know when did that story happen? And finally we are here with, and I didn't remember. I mean, again, I was young enough when I read these issues, or I read one of them. I think it might have been issue 20. I was young enough then that I didn't remember he had a costume. That the Scavenger actually is a costumed character.
Right.
Because later, I think I might have read issue 21 or 22 as well. Later, he's not in costume.
Right.
I think we'll find out. But
I remember, and I'm not going to spoil it for our listeners. We'll get there in this episode. But I remember as a kid being very angry with issue 20, with the promise that was on the cover of issue 20. Yeah. And it was the first time I had ever been exposed to that bait and switch that's so prevalent, of course, in any form of marketing. But we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, as you know from the last 2 episodes, the Man-Thing is no longer in the swamp. He and his buddy Richard Rory have fled Citrusville, where they're burning books and where the fascists are in full control, for the metropolitan wonderland of Atlanta. Talk about a fish out of water. And we open with, now we should also tell you, this issue is told out of order. I'm not sure why Gerber decided to craft it this way, but we're just going to tell you the story as it unfolds on the pages. But where we open is not where the story begins. But we see the Man-Thing walking down a suburban Atlanta street, and inside is a woman named Colleen Sanders, who is fleeing her husband and her 2 children.
Right. We should say also, issue 19, written by Steve Gerber, art by Jim Mooney, inks by Frank Springer.
Yes.
Again, always, classic Marvel artists. I also want to point out, Brian, before we continue with the story, weirdly to me, there's a separate credit, Scavenger costume designed by Anthony Pezzella.
I saw that.
I've never heard of Anthony Pezzella, and I'm good on Len Wein or Mooney and Springer or the whole team for giving credit to Anthony Pezzella for a costume that isn't really anything special, but clearly this guy designed it and they gave him credit. So I appreciated that. And I thought it was interesting to note because that doesn't really happen. I thought that was an interesting thing. Anyway,
Anthony Pezzella was actually a big fan. He was one of those super fans in the 70s.
Okay.
He created the Daredevil character Deathstalker.
Yeah.
He designed his costume as well.
Interesting.
He was a big fan of Gerber's, and he would exchange letters with them, and of course the early convention days. But yeah, he designed this costume, Deathstalker's costume of a character in Iron Man, but I can't remember who it was. Basically, he had entered some Marvel fan contest, and they liked his stuff so much that they kept going back to him.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. But not enough to hire him to draw comics.
No,
that's okay. So so we're with Colleen Sanders. She's leaving her husband. She's leaving her children. And gets in her VW bug, and the Man-Thing silently witnesses her departure.
But
right. As she's leaving, Brian, for some reason, the Man-Thing feels yet a different emotion than the one he's getting from Colleen, and that emotion comes from the Scavenger. That emotion is, and I'm going to read to you, Brian, lust. Vicious, viperous, all-consuming, like nothing the slime crawler's empathic nature has ever known before. More than lust, hostility, unbridled hatred, interlaced with seething hunger.
So the Scavenger is the 1970s equivalent of these morons who cut off the heads of Rose Tico and Captain Marvel action figures for YouTube hits.
There you go.
So yeah, he lands on Colleen's car. Apparently, he possesses super strength because he rips through the roof of the car like it's nothing. Pulls her out. The car wrecks, and he says, "You're mine now. Oh Lord, you're all mine. I want you now. I must have you."
But the interesting thing is that although it is, he forces a kiss on her. And it does seem like this is a sexual assault, and in some ways it clearly is a sexual assault, but there's more to what the Scavenger is doing than that.
Yes.
He's sort of vampiric in his way, which we'll get to.
Yeah, Gerber tells us Colleen doesn't feel pain. She feels rather the sensation of being swallowed whole. But that sensation passes as the Man-Thing intervenes, yanks the Scavenger off of her, and they begin to fight.
Yeah. Of course, the Scavenger tries to fight Man-Thing. He's less than successful.
Yeah, that doesn't work out well.
My favorite part of this is, and I hope that you use these panels on YouTube. He butts the Merc Monster, bowling him over and burying his own head in the Quag Beast's oozing mass. And in the next panel, when he pulls back, he's basically wearing a Davy Crockett hat made of Man-Thing muck.
Yep. I do, in fact, have those panels scanned for the YouTube version of this podcast.
Good.
So
I'm glad.
So yeah, the neighbors, they hear the commotion. They come out in the street. Scavenger escapes. The neighbors open fire on.
We should mention also that he's got super strength and flight.
Yes, he can fly as well. But yeah, the neighbors open fire on the Man-Thing, and they check on Mrs. Saunders, and one of the neighbors, who it turns out is a nurse, says that her mind has been eaten away, that the Scavenger has turned her into a vegetable.
Yeah, she's basically got the intellect of a toddler or less at this point. She's I want go down, mommy. Like this is what she's saying here.
Yeah.
So he has basically wiped or drained much of who she is and her mind.
Now, if you're wondering, where is Richard Rory in all of this?
Because I'm sure that everyone listening to this has been thinking all along, I wonder where Richard Rory is.
Well, I am. I mean, we talked about it when we were covering the actual Defenders, but, second only to Valkyrie's husband, Jack Norris, Richard Rory is my favorite non-powered, supporting character, background character in Marvel. I love the character. And, this is my favorite 2 panels of the issue. He's parked in this motel, and he comes out to the van and finds the van door open, and he says, "Oh no, Man-Thing figured out how to open the doors. What am I going to do? Where did he go?" And then he cups his hands to his mouth and he says, "Man-Thing, come here, Man-Thing, come on, boy," like he's a dog.
And all I could think of, for those of us who are of a certain age, all I could think of is the old Looney Tunes cartoon with, "Oh, Belvedere, come here, boy."
So we then get a several page recap of their flight from Citrusville. We a reminder that it's not just Richard and Man-Thing. Young Carol Selby, the daughter of one of the fascists who participated in the book burning, is with them as well. They're in the van. The Man-Thing is happy in the van. He likes the emotions that comes off of them.
Right. We also get an explanation of how the Man-Thing is now finally able to leave the swamp in Citrusville.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I found this interesting. Instinctively, Man-Thing knew the chemical bath he'd received had altered his weird physiology. No longer was he forced to spend all his days and nights in the shadow-haunted marshland. His body had become a self-contained ecosystem, drawing nourishment from itself, recycling its waste, feeding on them again.
That's right.
And that's what we'll all be in the future, in the post-climate change future. We'll all be self-contained ecosystems feeding off our own waste. But,
we're recording this on Monday the 8th. It'll air on Tuesday the 9th. Last night I began the steps of applying for the 43rd season of Survivor. It's not a joke. I really am. I would like to think that I am already a self-contained ecosystem, but should I make the final cut and appear on the show after 39 days without a shower or brushing my teeth, I think I probably would resemble the Man-Thing on national television.
Well, the Man-Thing by way of Mandy Patinkin. Man-Thing.
Yeah, there we go.
You'd be Man-Thing Patinkin. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think it would. So Richard can't find Man-Thing. He goes to wake up Carol, and he says, we got to call the police. But before we do that, we have to call your parents and tell them you're okay and where you are. And Carol drops a bomb on Richard. She says, we can't do that because I lied to you. I'm only 17 years old. So which means that legally he has kidnapped her.
Richard is now unwittingly guilty of a federal crime.
Yes.
He has taken a minor across state lines without the permission of her parents. Ergo, he is a kidnapper.
Yes.
A child abductor. And Richard's like, oops. Now, the solution to this is clearly to bundle Carol back in the van and drive her immediately back to Florida.
But he can't. Man-Thing's still on the loose in Atlanta.
Then we see Scavenger flying, around, and he's looking for someone else to feed on. His mad appetite still unsated, and he doesn't find anybody as tantalizing as the woman he assaulted earlier, but he attacks a decidedly, quote, uncomely waitress in a tacky donut shop.
Her name is Millicent Godfrey.
And I just feel like I want to say something to all the Millicents in the world. You are beautiful, you are intelligent, and you do not need the Scavenger to tell you. I feel like Steve Gerber was saying, if your name is Millicent Godfrey, you can't be attractive.
Well, and I would add on what my esteemed colleague Chris has said, and I would tell you that if you're a waitress in a tacky donut shop, you are doing the Lord's work.
Damn straight. Damn straight. And I'm not. We're not kidding either, man. I mean,
no, I'm not. I've dated many waitresses in my life. I have a profound respect for that profession. That is a hard fucking job. And it's an important job.
Absolutely. Putting up with assholes. This is a tangent, but we should just call it tangent dialogue from now on. What's the name of the comedian? Bill, he's dead. The guy.
Bill Hicks?
Bill Hicks, thank you.
My favorite comedian of all time.
Couldn't think of his name. And there's that Waffle House gag that he does about, he's sitting reading in the Waffle House, and the waitress comes up and says, "What you reading for?" And he says, "Not what was I reading, but what was I reading for?" And Hicks's joke about responding to the waitress is that he responded by saying he was reading so he never had to wait tables in a Waffle House. And I related that to my son Daniel last night, and Daniel looked at me and he said, "What an asshole." And I thought, You're right. He was a total asshole. That is vicious.
Yeah. I love Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks, George Carlin, my two favorites of all time. But what I'm finding in both of their cases, but particularly in the case of Bill Hicks, Generation Z, they view those jokes through a completely different lens. And I'm not sure they're wrong about that.
Yeah.
I as I've explained to my 12-year-old, I think you have to have lived in the time when these jokes were told to see why they were cutting edge and why they were shining a light on some of the things going on in our society. But they hold up very differently now.
Yeah.
And again, folks, don't get me wrong. Carlin, Hicks, those are the two faces on my comedy Mount Rushmore. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Bill Hicks is funny, but I didn't hear him. I didn't listen to him until I was much older.
Yeah.
So for me, it's George Carlin and Richard Pryor.
I love Richard Pryor too. I love Richard Pryor as well.
And Eddie Murphy also from that era. But Carlin and Richard Pryor, because of what their comedy did, their comedy was like Scavenger landing on top of your car and ripping the roof off. No, it's true. And I saw Carlin live. Crazy. But anyway.
Well, anyway, so Scavenger plants a big old kiss on poor Millicent Godfrey, and there's no Man-Thing there to stop him this time. So she loses more than her mind. Bit by bit, her very life is drained away until there is nothing left but a clattering skeletal cage, an apparently inedible core that the Scavenger just callously tosses away.
Yeah. Yeah. The skeleton and the clothing and a bunch of donuts go flying. And that was startling. You go from, okay, we saw what he did, but now we see what he can do. And also you're like, who is this guy?
Yep.
This is a character who just appears out of nowhere, but he has a costume and flies and has super strength and basically sucks every ounce of life out of and off of you.
That's right.
Anyway, we go back to Richard Rory.
He's worried about going to jail.
Yes.
And, him and Carol are debating it when suddenly there's a scream.
Well, wait, though. I know but you have to go with Carol's dialogue. Richard's worried he's trying to figure out how to get out of this. And Carol's response is, "I'll write to you in prison." I mean, with time off for good behavior, you only be 50 or so. When you get out, we can still be friends, can't we? I mean, I've always been attracted to older men. I mean, yeah, but I'll write to you in prison. It's okay. Anyway, then they hear a scream.
They hear a scream, and it turns out the Man-Thing has come back to find Richard and Carol. He's inside the motel, but there's a very frightened man in the hallway between them, and of course, whatever knows fear. But here we get something interesting. The bond between Richard and the Man-Thing has strengthened to the point where, the Man-Thing is reaching out to burn this fear, and Richard says, no, stop, don't hurt him. And the Man-Thing listens, and Richard is able to direct him to go back outside.
Yep. And he's accompanying him outside when who should crash through the window in pursuit of the Man-Thing but the Scavenger. And he says, they may as well know what I am, what they've created. I'm the vandal in you all. Do you hear me? The animal in each of your hearts, the beast that kills, ravages, mutilates, and feeds on savaged flesh. And again, I don't know where this guy came from, but we're going to find out.
He's Scavenger, king of the incels.
Yeah, exactly. He is Scavenger, king of the incels.
So, he's taunting the crowd, and Richard snatches up a freestanding ashtray and starts creeping up behind him. But before he can bash Scavenger's brains out, Scavenger turns around, backhands him, and tosses him aside, and he says, "Do you want to see what I am? Do you want to see what terrible ogre hides behind this mask?"
Mm-hmm.
And this reminded me a lot of Dr. Doom in Fantastic Four when he finally took his mask off in issue 200.
Yeah.
Scavenger pulls off his mask, and Steve Gerber tells us that he has a face the ancient Greeks would have deemed that of a god.
Yeah, he says, beautiful, aren't I? Not a troll, not some gargoyle, just a very pretty man who hates all of you for what you did to me. It is such a weird, it's a weird character, and it gets weirder.
It is. The crowd is confused, and their emotions run the gamut from enormous attraction, repulsion, loathing, loving, and all of this just completely overwhelms the Man-Thing. He practically shuts down, which allows the Scavenger to attack him again.
Yeah.
The Man-Thing, in fighting him, rips his cowl off, and the Scavenger pauses. He's like, "Where's my cowl? Where is it? I have to hide my face again." But as the Man-Thing approaches, he touches Scavenger's face. The Scavenger finally knows fear, and of course, whatever knows fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch.
Yes. And then we get to the cover of issue 20, Brian, and yes, what a letdown based on this cover. Like, I want this comic book. We don't get this comic book, but I want
because the cover blurb tells us, because you demanded it, Man-Thing battles Spider-Man, Daredevil, Shang-Chi, and the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing. And there they all are on the cover fighting the Man-Thing.
Yep. And that cover, I got to tell you, I wonder if that cover's for sale somewhere. I'm gonna see if I can find it, because what a piece of art. I love it.
Yeah.
So much.
Now, Jim Mooney handles the art solo on this issue. Steve Gerber is still writing. This issue is called The Nightmare Box. We get the recap of all recaps.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, but at least we only get that recap in a single page.
Yeah. And then we immediately cut to the action. The Scavenger, he's feeling his horribly burned face, and he says, "It's over now. The torment, the loathing, all over. The curse has been lifted. I'm free."
Yeah. Now that he's not pretty, he thinks he's free, but then he realizes something's wrong. I'm still dead. I can't feel your touch. I'm still cold. Nothing's changed.
And then he says something even more telling, and regular listeners, their ears will prick up when they hear this. He says, I'm still what I was. Thog lied to me. Thog? Why, the Doctor Doom to Man-Thing's Fantastic Four? Could he be coming back?
Well, Scavenger puts his mask on and flies away, and then we get a conversation with Richard Rory and Carol. And basically the manager, this is one of my favorite part of this issue, the manager of the motel kicks them out, basically says, you take that muck monster and go. You caused enough trouble with the giant monstrosity from the swamp that, I love the fact that that's his thing. He's not like screaming or freaking out or trying to keep away from Man-Thing. He's like, no, you have to go. You caused too much trouble. This is like every hotel manager when Brian Keene has been there for 6 hours.
So go they do. The trio get back in Richard's van and they drive away. We then see a highway. They're taking an exit, and we see a car ignoring the wrong way do not enter sign and crashes into them head on.
Yeah, I mean, there's an accident, the crash, and then the people are trapped in the car, the people who had been there.
Richard and Carol are trapped in the van.
Well, initially, Richard and Carol are trapped in the van. Man-Thing has to get them out.
We should note that the car that hit them, a very mysterious box is ejected from it and lands next to the Man-Thing.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, he rescues Richard and Carol from the wreck. Carol says her leg's broken, she can't move. She tells Richard, that he has to get away. He has to leave her there. He's going to go to jail for kidnapping her. And while they're debating it, the driver of the other car who hit them, he cries out to Thog and a number of other demons who we know from the Defenders and Doctor Strange to save him. Richard and the Man-Thing go running over, and we find out that it's not a human being driving that car at all. It's a demon. And he tells them that the box that was ejected from the car must go to another courier. And they have to see to that, and they will be rewarded. And then the car blows up.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Continue, Brian. Sorry.
That's okay. I know we have some crossover listeners between comic book fans and fans of ours who are, of course, fans of horror fiction. And it occurred to me in reading this that some of you out there right now might be saying, well, Richard Chismar is the same age as Chris and Brian. He must have read this issue of Man-Thing before he and Stephen King wrote Gwendy's Button Box. I can tell you he did not, because Rich was not a big comic book guy. He and I have talked about this. He was a sports card collector. And while we know that Gwendy's Button Box is remarkably similar to the box here in this comic published in 1977, that novel was King's idea, and King was not reading these at that time either. So it's one of those weird cases of art and zeitgeist. I find it fascinating because this box, for all intents and purposes, is Gwendy's Button Box. It's Pandora's box.
It is.
But done decades before that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's really interesting, Brian? I feel like we've never done this before, but I think we've gone. The episode this is a really interesting spot with this box. I think we should conclude this episode and pick up in the middle of this issue, because from here to the end of this series is sort of one story, because this is really the beginning of it. And
yes, I agree.
Conclude here, and next week we'll pick up here and go right to the end.
I concur, because as we said, it's a 4-issue story, and it all hinges on this box, and there is a lot to unpack. So I agree. Next episode, we'll finish issue 20, and then issues 21 and 22. Folks, if you think it's weird now, if you think this coverage of Man-Thing has been weird, you ain't seen nothing yet. Gerber
Too many
goes
tangents
out.
this week. We'll try to contain our tangents next week.
Yeah, Gerber goes out with an acid trip bang. It's like Elf with a Gun on steroids.
Yep. Well, and the only thing missing is the Elf with a gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, if you're listening to these out of order, next week we finish up Man-Thing, and then we will do an episode focusing on Marvel's Legion of Monsters, which is Man-Thing and our old pal Ghost Rider, and 2 characters that we haven't really covered on the show yet, Morbius the Living Vampire and Werewolf by Night. And then after that, Chris, I know you're excited for it. I am too, and the listeners I've heard from are excited for it. We're going to dive into Marvel Team Up and Marvel 2-in-1, both of them. Each episode will try to do at least 1 issue of each.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's going to be really fun, and we'll have all kinds of crazy shit to discuss. So
Right.
I look forward to wrapping this up next week. And
right.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, folks, once again, as we do every week, a shout out to our engineer, Matt Wilderson. In fact, Matt and I were talking. I don't know how much of this I'm allowed to talk about yet or not, but he has his 3 novels out, which you can get, or 3 books out, short story collections, which you can get on Amazon right now. But he has a novel coming out from a publisher this spring from Death's Head Press, which I've read. It's fantastic. So maybe go on Amazon and follow his author page on there, and you'll be notified when that new book is released.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
I look forward to it.
Plugging it here incessantly. As we should.
Well, Excelsior to that.
Well, my friend, we will talk next week, and we will find out the fate of the Man-Thing.
We will.
All right.
See you then,
what
true believers.
I say. That's right. Excelsior, true believers.
Defenders Dialogue. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Defenders Dialogue is written and produced by Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com.